He is Jalen Rose. I'm David Jacoby.
What up,
we
yo?
are Jalen and Jacoby. What is it that we do?
Give the people what they want.
Jalen, the NBA players have decided to return to play to continue the playoffs. Do you think this was the right decision considering everything that's going on?
After you boycott and you get us back to the issues that are hurting our hearts, when you really pay attention to what Paul George said about his anxiety and depression, when you see the frustration of George Hill about being in the bubble, or Jaylen Brown talking about he wish he could protest, all of a sudden the players realize if we're going to be in the bubble, we might as well complete the task. However, while completing the task, let's get the conversation back towards social justice. And they did just that. Other leagues followed. It was a monumental move. I'm so very proud. And yes, finish the season. You know why? Allow this revolution to be televised. Make people who don't like the slogans on the back, liberation, say his name, say her name, education reform, vote. Make them watch that or not. Make them see Black Lives Matter on the court or not. And for all of the NBA's partners, remember, don't judge anything right now based on numbers, because the grand number that we will be getting if these players get very dissatisfied is 0. That's what we're comparing it to. So as long as we're getting any basketball, as long as we're getting any support and any viewers, that's the win.
First, I want to commend all of the NBA players and the whole NBA community for what has happened, not just in the past 48 hours, but during this entire bubble experience. The Black Lives Matter on the court, the slogans on the back of the jerseys, the press conferences turning away from talking about basketball, but to talking about social injustice. But my question for you is this, with even all of that happening, it wasn't enough to change society in a meaningful way. And we know that when we watch the video of Jacob Blake. Now, Jalen, how do you think things will change from pre and post the Bucks and the other teams not playing those games for 2 days?
Well, one thing that's going to change is that now when somebody punches the bully, it gives everybody else courage. And shout to the WNBA. Everybody who follows our show knows how much we love what they do on and off the floor. It now gave strength to soccer, some of the teams in baseball. NHL has to acknowledge it. Osaka basically not doing her match in tennis led to them canceling matches. Bubba Wallace, what he did, ultimately leading them to take down the Confederate flags. It's progress. And I'm going to give you a sports connotation, a way to think of it. It's field position. That's all. It's field position. We already understand that we're not going to score the game-winning touchdown and walk off like Peyton Manning in our final year. I know that's not going to happen. But we get 2 or 3 first downs, Jacoby, then we punt. Then we get the ball back again. We're slowly starting to inch towards trying to allow the world to not only acknowledge our pain, but help support where they can.
In such a monumental, historic, and strange summer, it really did feel like Wednesday night when I sat down to watch the Bucks Magic game and I started looking at Twitter and I realized the Bucks were not coming out. In that moment, I had one of those epiphanies, like, I am watching history right now. How do you think this moment will be remembered through decades?
It was one of my favorite moments in the history of sports, because a lot of times your dignity has to be bigger than a dollar. And there will be ramifications if you decide not to play the collective bargaining, and you don't want to upset your owners and this things of that nature. But as a Black community, we have to understand that usually we're the employee, like the NBA is in this case, because we don't own any corporations. We don't own any networks. So yes, we are the employees, but you know what we do control? We're the product. And when you go and buy something, the product dictates how much your value really happens towards the marketplace. And you can't just replace the entire Lakers roster. You can't just replace the entire Bucks roster and put the same quality out there. So when your sport is 74% Black like the NBA, 80 plus percent black for the WNBA, and even the NFL. You have to find ways to use that real estate to let your voice be heard. And we're talking about athletes defining and changing policy and calling senators and telling their citizen to vote. Where the elected officials at? I was watching TV last night, Jacoby. I didn't hear nobody say Black Lives Matter. And so as that rhetoric about anarchists being described to people who protest and want social justice, that just fuels the movement. And hopefully it puts people in position to make quality decisions as they get a chance to vote coming up.
And watching the Bucks with masks on read that statement, it really called back to a lot of images where athleticism and athletes and activism intersect. And you think about that picture that you have behind you every day in the studio with the Ali Summit. And you think about some of the things that Tommy and John did at the 68 Olympics and Bill Russell and Muhammad Ali. There's a long history of athletes, and specifically black athletes, being catalysts for change and fighting against social injustice. Do you think that these athletes that we are seeing in Orlando in a bubble during a pandemic will be remembered along with some of the images you see right now?
Absolutely. And you know how much pride I take in the imagery for our show, and very grateful that we've gotten a chance for 10 years to display that to mass multimedia. When we first started doing the show, the mass multimedia shows basically had helmets or bobbleheads or magazine covers. And so we wanted to go and bring the culture to the masses. And we've had two of those gentlemen on our show, and we took pride in having the legends of Jim Brown and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the show. And as you see history, look at their greatness, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Bill Russell, what he dealt with in Boston, Colin Kaepernick, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. All of those people have very distinct things in common. They were ostracized by society and vilified for their peaceful stance. And now that it's 2020 and these athletes have been able to stand on the shoulders of those giants, they know their economic power and they know their actual value in the marketplace. And they're using that scenario of being rich per se to influence their ownership that is wealthy to make change in the community that they all entertain, but they all should be influencing.
And while I watched this happen, there's something else that came to mind, because we are seeing the NBA stop, restart, and then stop again, and now restarting again. But we are also on the dawn of an NFL season. And Saquon Barkley and Sterling Shepard, they said that some New York Giants were considering not playing a regular season game. As we enter the NFL season, we've seen how the fight against social injustice has manifested itself in the NBA. How do you think it will manifest itself when the NFL season starts?
It's going to happen. And I hate to say this, other instances continue to take place. There's a litany of names that we've mentioned over the last 4 months, Jacoby. I can't act like we're going to go 4 minutes. I can't act like we're going to go 4 seconds, 4 minutes, 4 days without it happening again. And so when it does take place, I'm going to give you the graduated difference. NBA players completed their regular seasons and in theory got all of their checks. A lot of this is about strategy and about timing. So now that you're in the playoffs, plus everybody's in the bubble, forced to see one another, communicate with one another, all in the same place at the same time, it creates a cocoon for change. The NFL scenario, and lastly, NBA owners seem to be more apt to listen to their players and allow them to express themselves, even if they don't believe in those values per se. NFL players start to express themselves, then that league becomes the shield. And then it's like, wait a minute, let's find a different thing to do during the anthem. Let's find another way to express ourselves and not engage in affecting the bottom line. And so these players are going to be tasked with having guys that decide that they don't want to play. And then it's going to be other players that do want to play. Now, the NBA went through that as well. But here's the difference. Enter the Milwaukee Bucks. There got to be somebody to take a stand. And it happened in their backyard. So for the NFL owners, let's see if they muzzle the movement. I believe that they will. And when that happens, they're going to put the players at a crossroads. But another thing that's going to take place, NBA owners, NFL owners, y'all players are watching. And when they start to become free agents, they're going to keep score. And those will be the least popular teams as the musical chairs continue to happen moving forward as it relates to decisions about their careers.
That's a really good point. And about his own players' involvement in this movement, head coach of the Bucks, Bruce Arians, had this to say.
The responsibility is to take action. I don't know that protest is an action. I think each guy has a personal thing. I would beg them to take action, find a cause and either support it financially or do something to change the situation, because protesting doesn't do crap, in my opinion. I've been saying it since 1968.
Jalen, your thoughts on his statement?
So I'm going to always stay true and fair to who I am. And
Okay.
I stress that I believe that white silence is violence. And I also acknowledge that whether it's Drew Brees or whatever somebody's political beliefs are, I want people to express themselves. I'm not going to vilify them. I don't want them to hide in the closet. So I appreciate him taking his platform to try, in his opinion, to explain what's been happening in our country since 1968. He's somebody you can have a conversation with and try to get towards a solution. But what I want to teach him that's extremely important for us, protesting has done everything. That term gets thrown out there so very much that we don't acknowledge that there are multiple types of protests. There's sit-ins, there's picketing, there's striking, there's violent ones, there's peaceful ones. There's so many ways to do this. And to start what he said by acknowledging that they don't do anything, and then it almost seemed like the tone, because he used crap, that it could be condescending. But I'm going to let him live, because I'm happy that he's willing to have the conversation. That's what we need. It's not black versus white. It's everyone versus racism. And I'm glad that he's taken his forum to try to speak about something that he sees in his eyes we've tried to do since 1968, but haven't gotten any progress, in his opinion.
Well, I understand what he's trying to say, but I do think he's fundamentally wrong about one thing. Yes, it is probably more effective to donate your entire $1 million salary to these causes to help fight these causes. It's probably more effective to go to town hall meetings and try to influence political leaders to cause change in that way. But that is not mutually exclusive with protesting. You can do that and protest. There's no reason. It's not in lieu of protest you do this. And as you've mentioned, I have seen decades and decades since 1968 and before 1968 of protests lead to change. So that is what I fundamentally disagree with him about. But I also agree with you that these conversations are important, and we will continue to have them as we move forward, because, of course,
especially on this day, around 50 years ago, Martin Luther King delivered the I Have a Dream speech. Now, that was a guy, John Lewis was right by his side. That was a gentleman who decided that we were not only going to protest, but we were going to do it peacefully and turn the other cheek.
We'll continue the conversation right after this. Stay tuned. You're watching a very important episode of Jalen Jacoby. Welcome back to Jalen and Jacoby. Jalen, after this historic stoppage of play in the NBA, President Trump was asked about it, and here's what he said. He said the following, quote, the NBA, become a political organization, and it's not a good thing. I don't think that's a good thing for sports or for the country. Your thoughts?
Athletes discussing politics as taxpaying citizens is only not welcomed when you don't agree with what they have to say. But if it's Herschel Walker, if it's Brian Urlacher, I guess it's just fine. Here's the thing. The NBA players, and this goes to our Bruce Arians conversation, this is why protesting is so very important. Yes, you're going to have people like him now attach terms to it. Mob, anarchist, gangs. And so this, Jacoby, is where we have to stay disciplined and stay focused and not lose sight of the goal and not lose sight of our message. A lot of times noise happens around you. And that's what this is. This is just noise. Don't allow this to slow us down in our pursuit of progress and social equality. That's what we're going for. And I have news for everybody. Okay. America wouldn't be so great without Black lives. It wouldn't. So if you're touting that, you got to think about the people who gave their blood, sweat, tears, and free labor to this country. And don't keep your eyes on the prize.
Yeah, I mean the dog whistles and the coded language and the law and order platform, it's all politicizing race. And I think when you politicize race, every organization in which there are a diverse group of people working together sort of becomes a political organization. I think that's extremely dangerous to say that that's not a good thing, because I think the more conversations we have, like the one we're having right now, are a good thing, not just for sports, but also for our country. One interesting element from all of this is the role that Michael Jordan has reportedly played in it as a sort of liaison between the players and the owners. Now, naturally, being a legendary player and also an owner, that puts him in a unique position. What do you think about his role in what's happened in the last 48 hours?
I'm in a lot of ways so too disgusted to get excited. And let me tell you what I mean. So let me get this right. You got to be the greatest basketball player of all time, the highest grossing generating athlete of all time, who's become a brand and a logo within himself, to become the only major owner in a sport like the NBA that's 74% Black. And now when it's time to bridge the gap, guess who we're going to go get to talk to the players? Come on, man. Like, we've had one Black president. There's one president in the NBA, Masai Ujiri. That as much as, of course, I, like everybody else, is going to appreciate his voice and his role, and he the GOAT. And I know him standing in front of a room of young men, of professional athletes, they're going to be able to have a level of dialogue and respect to get us towards our goals. But I want to just talk about the systematic injustice part of that. It almost seems like, you know what, we can't really communicate with the Black guys, so let's go get the one that we have to do it for us. It just made me feel a little bit dirty when I saw the report.
There have been decades and decades and thousands of incidents of police being violent against people of color. And just this summer, George Floyd sort of started this movement, or not didn't start the movement, I should say, but sort of reinvigorated this racial reckoning happening in our country. And then it was Jacob Blake that sort of stopped the NBA. My question for you is, what do you think happens when we see the next incident of police violence against a person of color?
I think as these situations keep happening and the rhetoric you just described is taking place from higher offices, all that does is snowball the movement, especially for young people who look at the adults and say, we don't think like that. We don't feel like that about people that don't necessarily look like us. So I think the players, while they are able to get people to tune in to watch the games, at some point while the game should be physically being played, that's an opportunity to do some sort of sit-in, some sort of demonstration to acknowledge some of the things that they're wearing on the back of their jerseys and how you can now bring those things to life.
One thing that I find just so disgusting about all of this is that it just keeps on happening and keeps on happening and keeps on happening. And it turns my mind to something that happened just right here in my family. As you know, I'm in an interracial marriage, and we've got 3 interracial children, one of which is Quincy, my son, who's 7, and he accidentally saw the George Floyd video on television. And that led to a conversation of him looking at the screen and saying, wait a second, why is that man under the car? I thought the cops were the good guys. He literally said that. And then I had to explain to him about police violence and not all cops are the good guys. And this Jacob Blake video made me think, what if that happens again? What if it happens again? What if he sees this again and he sees it just a few months after he saw one previously? And that's really telling of where we are when an innocent 7-year-old boy who just loves Star Wars and construction trucks is having to be faced with this sort of violence against people that look like him on television. And it made me think to you, Jalen, how do you speak to your children, and how should parents talk to their children about these incidents?
Well, hate is taught like a blank canvas. And whatever they are exposed to, whatever they digest is what they become. So you continue to acknowledge the principles that you want to be bestowed upon you. Respect others. Think about their feelings. Be a please and a thank you and an appreciative type of person. And also make quality decisions. And even if you do all of that, because of your skin color, you're going to still have to work 2 times as hard and get paid half as less.
Well put. We'll continue with more right after this. You're watching Jalen Jacoby. Welcome back to Jalen and Jacoby. Jalen, the Bucks not taking the floor on Wednesday night has reverberated all throughout the sports world, and you see the litany of leagues that have stopped games, that have joined the movement. What does this tell you?
That they want to police accountability. They want to make sure that the owners allow them to use their resources to make sure people vote in their communities, which is very important. They want to enact the George Floyd law that related to how police are able to interact with people that they're alleged suspects. But how about Jacob Blake's state right now, Jacoby? He gets shot in the back 7 times with his kids in the back of the car. He's paralyzed from the waist down. And in a hospital bed right now, he's handcuffed. He's paralyzed from the waist down, and right now he's handcuffed. This is how America has treated us since the beginning of time, and it's disgusting.
It's absolutely disgusting, and he has not been charged with a crime. Everyone enjoy your weekend. We will see sports over the weekend, but we will not stop the fight against social injustice.